2 days away.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I know there's elevator problems, but I think we better just start. Thank you, John Pound, for recording us. This is where the league met when I moved into Horizon House in 2011. We had a big table in the room. We sat around. And we got too big, and we had elevator problems then, too. So we're here, hopefully, just once, and we will be back next meeting, Monday, March 18th, in the social room and forum. Thank you to Ann Anderson, who keeps up our email list. Ann, where are you? Yeah. And we didn't clap for John, so you can clap for him too.
Joan, you and Sandy did a lot of the work that I just then used. So you are the information for what I did.
Speaking of Sandy Bergen, our membership coordinator, she wants us to be sure to acknowledge our new members, and you can stand or wave. Cassandra Carruthers, Karen Fern, Mary Kenny, Cassandra Royce Sanderson, she lives in Renton, but she came to one of our meetings in December, and Judith Wood. Thank you all. And Sandy will have some remarks at the end. Bill Roach is a league member and chair of our Horizon House Environment Committee, and he's been tracking bills in the legislature. So he'll give us a brief update.
Well, thank you, Joan. My role in the Environment Committee is to track the environmental legislation in the legislature and try to get folks here engaged and participating and providing comments on that legislation. And I have 50 people that have signed up to be a part of that. And many of them, in fact, do follow that legislation. And I've got some mixed news in terms of where we are in terms of this session. As you may know, this is a short session. This is the second session of this legislature. This second session is a 60-day session, which requires things to move much more quickly than they would in the odd year, which is a 90-day session. And in this session, basically we're picking up legislation that was first proposed in last year that didn't make it. And in terms of the 9 bills that we focused on in terms of environmental impact, they came in 3 categories. 2 which unfortunately didn't make it through, and I'll go through those in a minute. A number of bipartisan bills which look like they might be successful, and then some more which will be more on a party line basis, and they might make it and they might not. But in terms of the calendar of this legislative session, all of the legislation to go forward has to go, of course, through both houses, and then which has to happen by the second week in February, and then what's left has to then be heard in the other house and be voted on. And we're in the midst of that part of the process. The 2 bills which unfortunately have failed this session, which were really high priority on the Environment Committee's list, were the REWRAP Act and the Bottle Deposit Bill. REWRAP was a very interesting piece of legislation which tries to get the packagers of packaging and the producers of plastic and wrapping and so forth to take basically responsibility for the overall recycling of that product. It happens that in Washington State we have a goal of at least 50% recycling, and we used to have a very good track record. However, we've long passed a period of growth in that field. In fact, as many think, it's actually a number of communities are actually reducing the amount of recycling that they are gathering, and it's become a real problem. And so this is a very major piece of legislation that still has some opponents, of course, and in this instance, the opponents were both the recycling industry itself, who saw this as an attack on their own bottom line, and folks on the more conservative side of the state. And while we got it through the first, very successfully through a committee process on the House side, the opponents were able to put together 23 amendments which have the effect of filibustering the bill. So that legislation has failed. And there are actually 5 states in this country, plus all of the European Union, which use this, what's called producer responsibility as a way of managing waste. It's a very interesting approach. It's something that we still think will happen here. It will happen probably in the next session when there's more time to overcome some of the filibustering kinds of things that the opponents would put forward. The second piece of legislation which fails also has to do with waste management, and it's a bottle deposit bill. There are 10 states in this country which do this and have a very effective way of managing that part of the waste stream. And again, the same group of opponents were able to not allow that to go forward. But again, there is a piece we think has promise. We believe that the next session, should the distribution of progressive legislators continue, I think it will be successful. But now on to the better part of the message, and that is the number of bills which actually have gone forward. And 3 in particular have actually had bipartisan support, which is a unique thing in this legislature. Very few bills going through really earn that kind of bipartisan support. They include a very major piece, which is something that will be of, I think, great interest to Horizon House, and that is the enhancing of funding incentives to, for large buildings to become more energy efficient. It's something that we as a community will, I think, benefit from if it gets all the way through. And at this point, it looks good. The House voted this bill through 97-0. It is now in the Senate and will be heard actually today in the Senate Environment Committee, and will be considered for a vote probably tomorrow. And I might mention that it's this week that the votes in the Senate or the House, the opposing committee or the other committee on the origin of the bill will be considering these votes and must get out of the second committee, this policy committee, by the end of the week. The next bill, again, which is bipartisan in nature, is the very interesting bill to promote thermal energy. It's an interesting approach that has quite a bit of promise. It would be another sustainable way of promoting energy in the state. And this again, in terms of the promotion of it, basically enabling gas and electric utilities to get into this field and look for thermal energy possibilities for promoting the generation of sustainable energy. And there's a second bill supporting this in the other house. That, by the way, also had a 97-0 support in the House as it advanced to the Senate. And that will be heard, actually, that is an interesting bill in that the Senate Environment Committee has chosen not to even have a hearing, but to go to the vote, which will be occurring tomorrow. Hopefully that will be also a successful, we'll find out, of course, after tomorrow. And the other interesting, promising proposal is promoting the development of geothermal energy incentives. In other words, helping these various entities drill for thermal energy. And it's a development, a grant program, and again, that has received a broad support, 97-0 again in the, 49-0 in the Senate. That's now going to the House for their consideration. So those are all of the, I think, the three bills that we believe will be promising for this session. And then we come to the three bills which are more on a party line basis, and they tend to be much more focused on a more controversial area that does not have the full support of the entire legislature. The first one is House Bill 2401, deposing of refrigerant gases. And that's a very interesting and a real challenging area. Refrigerant gases are in refrigerators and other cooling devices and so forth. And presently, there's not much of an understanding of how to handle that when an appliance reaches the end of its life. And so 80% of the waste stream for refrigerant gases, I can't say it exactly, is not recycled. And so what this bill would do is provide an incentive, a pricing incentive, so that there would be more of an interest in the marketplace to recycle these refrigerant gases. I might add that refrigerant gases are 4,000 times more potent in terms of the climate than CO2. So it's an extremely important thing to handle and to take appropriately. The vote in the House was 57-40, which is again a party line vote. It will now go to the Senate, and there was a public hearing last week in the Senate, and they will be voting on that on a committee basis tomorrow. We will be watching that closely, and hopefully that will be successful, but it does not have the same kind of assurance that the earlier legislation I mentioned. A second one is more focused on the outcomes of composting. It's a bill that is trying to find better ways of managing composting. That's an area that does not, again, have anywhere near the kind of recovery that other forms of recycling have. And it, again, establishes new grant programs for local jurisdictions to get into this area to try to do more work in composting. Of course, we here in this county have quite a robust system of composting, but various other parts of the state don't. So this would be, I think, a very important part of creating a better record for this area. Yet again, is a party line vote. In the House, it received a 58 to 39 vote, and again, goes to the Senate now, and we'll see how well that does. It only will be up for a vote this week, again, and we'll see how that goes. Another very interesting bill, which I think is requiring and funding and purchasing zero-emission school buses. There again, this is a pretty critical. The research tells us that kids in buses that are carried by diesel engines have a 3 to 5 times worse air quality within the bus that because of the exhaust in that bus. So there's a health issue here, as well as the energy savings that a zero emission program would promote. But here again, this is a very controversial bill. The funding would be prioritized to those communities which have a higher air pollution issue than others. Some here in the south end of Seattle are good examples of school districts that have those issues, as well as school districts with older buses that are more polluting, built before 2007, I believe. In 2007, they created something called the clean diesel engine, which is better than the older one, but not what we would like. That again, that is I think 58 to 39 was the vote in the House on that bill, and it goes up for a vote in the Senate. Actually, there's been no scheduled final vote on that. The hearing was today, or is today at 1:30 in the Senate committee. So we will again watch whether that bill will proceed and successfully. And then finally one, and this is one of, again, more interest to us, or quite a bit of interest to us at Horizon House, and that's energy in buildings. And that's an incentive program that is would be something that if it goes through, would be grants available for large buildings that need to transfer, need to move from carbon-based heating to heat pumps and electric-based heating. Something that we, as a large building, is interested in doing, and hopefully there will be some incentives, financial incentives, to help us do that. That again is a bill that is partisan in nature, and support, 58 support and 39 against. You can tell these votes are all fairly, you can see the pattern here, and you can pick out where the majority is and where the minority is on these various bills. And that again is a vote that will be up for consideration tomorrow. So we're right in the middle of these various, this process. We will know by the end of the week how successful we've been here. At the end of the week, it needs to go to the committee, to the floor of the House or the Senate, depending on where the bill is, and needs to be out of that House in a vote by, I believe, the end of the end of the week. And the session ends in March 1st is the end of what they call reviewing policy. Beyond the 1st to the 7th is an area that deals with more of the budget. So that's a rundown of a very small portion of the bills that are considered in the environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
You can clap. That's okay. We're so fortunate to have Bill's eye on bills. And the Environment Committee responds when he asks us, just like the League asks us in a legislative newsletter, to respond to action alerts to move these bills along. We're also very fortunate to have Senator Jamie Peterson, who's the majority, what's he called?
Floor leader.
Majority floor leader in the Senate, and Frank Chop, who was the House Speaker. Thank you. Those who serve on the lobby team are League members with a passion for a topic, or they are asked to focus on a topic by the League, the League board feels we must cover. They volunteer their time. They are or become experts in their fields. They are truly dedicated. We League members look up to them with admiration. We at Horizon House are fortunate to have Laura Weese and Ann Brand, who were actual members of the lobby team. So hold your questions to the end. I served on the League State Board a few years ago and had the opportunity to work with the lobby team. So I'm going to tell you for a few minutes how I became the lobby team chair, my political and League background. Without those experiences, I would not have been picked for that position while not being a citizen lobbyist myself. So when I was 13, my father decided to run for Commissioner of Public Affairs in Spokane. I doorbelled for him. My baby brother had just been born. Daddy won by 28 votes and served for 13 years. It was a nonprofit position. I never heard the words Democrat or Republicans uttered in our home, but I knew he'd been a socialist. He oversaw weights and measures. Safeway was mislabeling the kind of meat and the weight. City Health Department, public health doctor, and visiting nurses were under him. Carnation milk, the dairy workers were not washing their hands before milking cows. Feces and powdered milk was found in the milk. People were dumping all over the city, so he began a universal garbage collection. Dogs were running wild, so he put in a dog leash law. He put in a sewage treatment plant, sprayed mosquitoes, and received angry phone calls at home. We had to change from a party line to a private line. Someone wrote a dirty word on our church wall. People had one car in those days, but we had two because we had the city car. Those were the HUAC days, House American Activities Committee. And Al Canwell was the state director, and his brother Carl was on the city commission with Daddy. Daddy's was followed by a private detective, and people broke into his office looking for communist materials. He hired the first black person in government, and as mayor, he met dignitaries at the airport, Eleanor Roosevelt, Haile Selassie. Well, fast forward, when we built a house in an orchard in Clyde Hill. 25 years later, I sold it to David Robinson, and 30 years later, I found out that that's Nancy Robinson's son. I was asked to work the polls by a Republican in Kirtland, and then I continued to work at the polls for many years in Clyde Hill and Seattle. Became a Democratic Precinct Committee person, LD 48 District Chair, County Secretary. The East Side was Republican, and in 1984 I ran for state representative as a Democrat against a 5-term old man and lost. On New Year's Eve, I received a call from a legislator asking me to be in Olympia in a few days to oversee the pages. I took a cut in salary from Bethune and began a new career. In those days, people smoked and women wore high heels, and every Friday there was a bouquet on every legislative desk in the House. Pages, election poll workers, senators and representative staff are all political appointments. Well, I lived in rural Maine 1997 to 91. I repeated the LD 43 experience, precinct committee person, district chair, county officer, ran for state rep, lost again against a 5-term old Republican man. and was asked to work the legislature. In those days, and probably still, instead of passing the bills from House to Senate and Senate to House, like Bill was explaining to you, they have committees, 3 senators and 10 representatives. So for 3 sessions, I staffed the Housing and Economic Development Committee and the Corrections Committee. So I have been inside the prison and, in fact, several prisons. Then when I drove from Maine to Seattle in '91, I heard Senator Dwight Pelz on the radio. Dwight Pelz, I'd known him years before when we were trying to close down Hanford. Didn't succeed, of course. Called him up and he hired me to work 2 sessions. Some of you knew his parents here. Who know what were their names?
Dick.
Kelly and Dick. You might be interested in what a session aide does. I researched bills, took care of all his correspondence to constituents, and I responded, well, I'll leave this out. I kept his calendar on a card in his pocket so he knew what to do every 15 minutes of each day. Patty Murray was the whip, so she would call and tell the senators to get on the floor. The prayer was a buffer, allowing enough time for senators not to be late. One legislator tried to get prayers changed to poetry, but that didn't go anywhere. Senator Pelz would drive home every Wednesday and weekend, so I'd get to go to the receptions and the concerts in his place. In appreciation, when the session ended, he gave me a weekend for 2 at the Sylvia in Vancouver. So I have a lot of wonderful memories of working for the legislature. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit about the league background too. I moved to Horizon House in 2011. I hadn't been in the league for many years. I had been president in Winston-Salem Forsyth County League in the mid-'80s. So I was unit leader and served a short time on the Seattle-King County Board. Then Lou Templeton, who'd served on the state board, was on the nominating committee, and so she was so eager to get somebody on a slate that she typed up my application. So I was called an advocacy portfolio director, and to begin, I was to create action chairs around the state in each county league. We have 20-some. How many counties do we have, Bill? 29. So we're not in every county. Bill, you're my expert today. Thank you. So the purpose was for them to urge their local league members to be active during the session and set up meetings with legislators of their district during the league's lobby week. At that time, the state lobby team worked rather independently from the board. The president asked if I'd be willing to bring the lobby team and the board together. That's when I then became a person to oversee the lobby team. When the session was about to begin, the lobby team and I began making plans for an action workshop to inform members what to expect in the upcoming session. January till the end of the session, I set the agenda for weekly Zoom meetings. See, that was during COVID. We did not go to Olympia anymore. The lobby team and I put together the weekly legislative newsletter, which I copy edited. The state board was not using paper or notebooks, but computer, so I saw to it the testimonies of the lobby team members went into SharePoint like Dropbox, where we kept reports, agenda, notes, applications, lists. Kept up the league's SharePoint advocacy section and the state league's website advocacy section. When the session was over, I updated revised forms. The lobby team and I planned to retreat, and then we gave ourselves a rest until fall. So Laura and Ann asked me to describe the league's contract lobbyist. The state league engages the contract lobbyist who would give her advice to our volunteer issue chairs, those on the lobby team, I kept track of what she did, saw that she received payments, she attended every weekly meeting during the session and advised in between. She had several other clients. Coalitions. The League is a multi-issue organization. Coalitions are usually single issue and are made up of a number of organizations. Issue chairs find value in being part of a coalition because of its research and deep knowledge, development strategies, and connection to supporters and partners. Each year, our issue chairs ask our state board directors to approve and participate in certain coalitions, and sometimes they ask for the president's signature on a coalition letter. Any letter or co-sponsorship must adhere to lead positions, and in some cases, we write our own letter. Horizon House is full of interesting people who give us such a wide variety of experiences. Often we're so busy participating and leading groups here, we don't get the opportunity to find much out about each other. Now's our chance to find out about Laura Weese and Ann Brand, at least about what led up to their becoming citizen lobbyists and what they experienced in Olympia. So Ann.
Well, first of all, thank you. Good morning. How are you feeling? You want to stretch? You want to stand up? Kind of, no. Here. There we go. Anybody who wants to stand up and stretch, please feel free to do it. Unlike Joan, I parachuted into Seattle in 1990 as a recovering Californian. So a lot of what you're going to hear in terms of my lobbying experience had its roots in a very interesting time in the state of California for people who were on the other side of many of the issues that Governor Duke Majan had in the store for us as a absolutely confirmed Reaganite Republican. Anyway, the word lobbyist is defined as follows, according to Webster. A person acting for a special interest group who tries to influence the introduction of or voting on legislation or the decision of government administrators. Who, me? Well, yes. I did not plan to be a lobbyist. Little was further from my expectations for myself. I received a doctorate in psychology from UCLA. My career took an unexpected direction when I moved from basic research to clinical work, and then into community mental health organizations. I began by managing significant evaluation research activities and migrated into administration in county government, Los Angeles, and not-for-profit treatment organizations delivering comprehensive mental health and addiction services in Los Angeles, California, and in Bellevue, Washington, here across the lake, and in a State Department of Mental Health and Addictions in Oregon. I have quite a few years in the private nonprofit sector, which is a major and critical piece of the delivery system for community mental health and addictions treatment. They all need money and/or legislative enabling. Now, the last thing I expected was attempting to influence the political process. However, once I became the chief executive of private nonprofit organizations dependent upon public support for achieving the mission of improving the lives of poor and disabled people, I had to include lobbying in my bag of tricks for doing that job. My boards of directors expected it of me, my staffs expected it of me, and more importantly, the advocacy groups working to improve the lives of the people we served expected it of me. And even the decision makers expected it from me. Also, when I was part of the state administration in Oregon, a major part of my job was to convince legislators that the administration's plan was worthy of their support. Additionally, I had the lobbying table turned on me as I became the target of lobbying by groups of people trying to influence the policymakers. This gave me some appreciation for what it is like to be the recipient of impassioned efforts to influence decisions. Now, my perception of myself did not include being particularly persuasive, nor did I feel confident that anything I could do or say would have sufficient weight to cause opinions to shift enough to make a difference. Oh, I believe strongly, indeed passionately, in the righteousness of the cause and the absolute necessity of using public resources in the service. I even found it incredible that any right-minded person could not see the obvious merits in taking action to protect resources already in play and to add more resources that were obviously critical. It took me a long time to stop focusing on what I found so unjust in this imperfect world and to start listening. It turns out that for me, listening with an open mind and willingness to learn were two essentials to lobbying. In other words, to influencing others, that I did not anticipate. The kind of lobbying I do is aimed at persuading people to act without any reward except the satisfaction of feeling that they are doing the right thing. The strength of my case is grounded in the value of the coalitions to which I belong. For example, the League of Women Voters. Always, the processes of building coalitions and using them effectively have been the keys to any success I have known. And effective coalition building depends upon the willingness of participants to listen to each other, to learn what the common and uncommon grounds are for concerted action, and to take only the action as a coalition member that has been agreed upon. I have found that a requirement of my success in convincing another to adopt my position is knowledge of what is important to the person or group I am attempting to persuade. It is not enough that I present a cogent, well-documented, compelling case. I must also demonstrate a sympathetic awareness of the competing forces that are in play. Admittedly, I may not know what they are or may decide the better course is not to refer to them. But the very fact that I am lobbying is evidence that I know the target of my effort is struggling with competing alternatives. It is helpful to communicate awareness of that struggle and on occasion appreciation for it. This can be done in cafeterias, at bus stops, in hallways, wherever and whenever the opportunity arises. There will be ample opportunities for us to weigh in on the many issues confronting our legislators now and in the years ahead. I have learned that the people we elect to represent us truly value hearing from us. We need not be reluctant in this, nor worry that we will make some kind of faux pas or mistake. The crucial thing to remember is your opinion, your interest, your preferred action are grist for our elected representatives' decision mill. They need your input in order to represent you. For that matter, if you rely on organizations to which you belong to advance your views, make sure they know what it is you believe and want to see happen. Don't be shy. Not that many of you are. You too can lobby for the cause you believe in. So here's to our success and a reminder of one of the best pieces of advice I've ever received. Take not thyself too seriously. When I came here, I had had a lot of experience in the trenches. And when I joined the League of Women Voters up here, the woman who had been doing their healthcare lobbying became ill and could no longer do it. And I was sort of parachuted into that job too. My friend, some of you may know Linnea Hurst, and certainly Joan and Adele and many people here who persuaded me to go on, you can do this, just pick up the portfolio and run with it. One thing that really helps about taking on a portfolio for the league is they really give you a platform with all the planning that's done with the positions that are established by the league, whatever they are, whether it's healthcare, the environment, justice, education, welfare, whatever that portfolio is, the positions given to lobbyists to work through with their lobbying efforts are consensus positions by the league. You have the full weight of the league and its coalition members when you walk into a legislator's office. And for me, that was a real luxury, because the legislators, particularly those with some experience, really respect the league and know that it's a bipartisan position that's being promoted, that's focused on issues and not partisanship. And that is hugely, hugely beneficial. And now, it is so simple. You get your legislative newsletter, if you pick out those areas where you have the most interest, and you do not have to do the research. The research has been done for you. You do need to obviously read what you're promoting, but you just push the right button, see what else to do, push the next button, see what else to do, and you register your preference. Now, I don't believe that's nearly as effective as boots on the ground, but it works. They count. They count how many pluses and minuses they get in an issue, and it matters. So I would encourage you to do that. Anyway, I now shift gears. Here comes Laura Weese. Laura is not well, but she prepared remarks, and Joan has asked me to do it. So I'm Laura. Here she is. Citizen lobbyist, 1973 to 1976. In January 1973, I was asked by the State League of Women Voters President, Maxine Kroll, to come on the State League board with the Human Resources portfolio. At that time, this portfolio included status of women, welfare, and housing. Along with board responsibilities, I became a volunteer lobbyist for the League, a position I held for 4 sessions of the Washington State Legislature, 73 to 76. I joined the other state board members in weekly trips to Olympia, meeting to decide which bills the League would support or oppose, and getting the message to legislators. Now, my first experience in testifying for the League was before the Senate Ways and Means Committee with its powerful chairman, Martin Durkin. My testimony was in support of general assistance unemployed, a welfare category that provides temporary payments to single adults who did not qualify for federal programs such as Supplemental Security Income, SSI, or aid to families with dependent children, AFDC. The larger joint federal state welfare program went to single parents, almost entirely to mothers. After I gave my testimony, Senator Durkin called me out saying, quote, "When you people come and tell us to add more money to the budget, you don't tell us where the money is going to come from. What do you want us to cut to fund GAU?" Now, if you know Laura, you can imagine. I say this is Laura. I was not at all prepared to answer this question, so I had to retreat back to my seat, feeling embarrassed that my first appearance before the legislature had gone so badly. I can identify. But there were good things about being a citizen lobbyist. I learned a lot in Olympia. You get a picture of the entire state with legislators and lobbyists from every corner of Washington. Another thing you learn is that it takes a coalition to pass a bill. Supporting a budget proposal to raise welfare grants to AFDC recipients, I worked with Kay Thode of the Seattle Urban League and the Welfare Coalition she had organized, as well as lobbyists representing legal services, social workers, Catholic charities. On any bill, colleagues got together and planned their strategies in the lunchroom of the Capitol or out in the corridors. I met some great people this way. Another good thing, my weekly commutes with other lobby team members, usually 5 of us would carpool together to our weekly meetings. In the drive from Seattle, I was joined by Nancy Rust, who later served in the House of Representatives and chaired the Natural Resources and Environment Committee, and by Audrey Gruger, first a state legislator and then a King County council member. Already, former Seattle League presidents served in the legislature. Lois North in the Senate, later elected to the King County Council, and Mary Ellen McCaffrey. Her granddaughter now leads the League of Women Voters statewide redistricting efforts, who chaired the Ways and Means Committee in the House and worked with Governor Dan Evans to get an income tax measure on the state ballot in 1969. The State Equal Rights Amendment, ERA, was approved by Washington voters in November 1972. Legislation to implement the state ERA was before the legislature in the 73 session. Some of the issues I worked on were no-fault divorce support, limits to working hours for women, undue restrictive limits, and creation of a Washington State Women's Council, a successful coalition-driven effort, only to be disbanded in the early 1980s when Dixie Lee Ray was governor. Speaking of women at the legislature, I remember a meeting in Olympia in 1971. The Seattle League had adopted a study of the state legislature as a program item. We visited the legislature and heard a talk by the staff director for the Senate. Someone asked, "Why are there no women on the Senate staff?" The answer came back, "Well, we do a lot of our business in hotel rooms. It wouldn't be appropriate for women." Fortunately, things began to change after that. More women elected to the legislature and women serving on the staff at both houses. I worked as an intern for Senate Committee Services in 1977 under Barbara Howard, who staffed the Senate State Government Committee, a very respected professional. Both houses of the legislature have a nonpartisan committee staff like Senate Committee Services and partisan staff who serve individual members of the legislature. I was appointed an intern with a recommendation of league member, then Senator Ruth Ritter. Thank you, Barbara. Not me.
Sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we have time for some questions and comments. Some of you may have some experiences you might want to share. We have about 10 or 15 minutes. And Madeline Betts, our former unit chair, will hand the microphone around, and so will Adele, and she'll give you one too, Adele. So, who would like to say something?
Where's the microphone? Yay!
And Adele is also a former unit leader.
Who's ready to speak? Aha!
Say your name when you speak, so we'll be sure we all know each other.
That's always helpful. Cassandra.
Good morning. I'm Cassandra Carruthers, and I'm not remarking so much on what has been said from the podium, but rather how pleased I am to be here. It has been since the early 70s that I was in the 60s and 70s that I was in the League of Women Voters in Kansas City and served on the board for 10 years. And the very week that I was asked to become president, my husband got a job offer here in Seattle. And I want you to know it is just such a lovely feeling to be here with like minds that are looking for answers that benefit us all. And so I don't know what I have to contribute necessarily, but I'm really glad and proud to be here. Thank you.
Nancy Rust was mentioned, and she was a league member here. She was concerned about the, what do you call it, the tree cover? Canopy. And so we had, the league, our unit here has had 2 or 3 times the city arborist speak to us. Okay, Anne. Over here.
Thank you, Anne,
This
for
is a
your
question.
speech.
This is a question for those of you who've been here in the league long enough. Who was the woman, now no longer with us, who won the award here from the league, state league? She was our league president here for a long time, or unit leader for a long time. I'm sorry I can't remember her name, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that we have a long history here, First Hill in particularly, of having people who made their mark here in Seattle, both before I got here and since I've been here. So it's wonderful to see all of you ready to pick up the mantle that has jumped from Adele and Laura and others have done, Sandy working hard, all of you who keep this thing going, whether it's just running the computer or actually contributing. report, but anyway, that's, I was just wondering, I couldn't remember her name.
And
Yeah.
for several years, Joan and I both were on the Citywide League's Transportation Committee. We learned more about what happens with transportation in this city and region than I ever thought we would. It wasn't just buses and trains and so on, but we had the port and the airport, as well as other transportation issues. This was before the cooperation between Tacoma and Seattle ports, which I thought was absolutely insane. And shortly after that, not due to anything I did, they did merger their efforts. And for just one detail, I don't know how many of you know that the Port of Seattle has very little facility to put cargo directly from boat on or ship onto rail. And there's no way for us to have that, whereas Tacoma has a lot of facility to do that. So by the cooperation, that was influenced a lot. Another issue that came up was the ferries spewing diesel when they're in port, and how do you transfer them to city power grid? And then the question came up, that's a lot of power, can we provide it? So that was another issue. There was an issue about rail across. I don't know if you knew, but there were 2 tunnels to take rail across the state. One could take piggyback containers and the other could not. So that limited things. So you just found out a lot of what the frustrations and the successes that have happened with the transportation. We had guests at every monthly meeting that came to tell us some aspect of what was going on in the ports. It was just very interesting. And after the leader was no longer able to do it, that committee fell apart, and I noticed it has not formed up again. But for a long time, we did get reports from the lobbyists that had covered that area. It's just one experience.
Barbara Knight, I think you had some experiences you want to share.
Well, I want to make a comment about the port and railroads. I used to have
Turn around so you can be on camera.
Oops. Okay, I used to have an office in the Jackson Federal Building, and at 12:30 every Friday afternoon, a large container ship would come down Puget Sound. There would be 3 tugs out on the water, ready to push the cargo ship into the docks down there. The cranes would be up as soon as the ship hit the docks, the cranes would go down. They would pick up, like boxes and put them on trucks, and they'd haul them out of here. I mean, you could set your watch Friday afternoon at 12:30. That's when the cranes would go down and they'd start unloading one of those ships that used to come over from China and arrive here on Friday. Anyway, anyway.
Amazing. Amazing.
Well, I mean, it's like clockwork.
And it works.
Yeah, it works. Okay.
Well, thank you all for your comments. Now Sandy Bergen, come and speak with us. And we want to hear an update also on Mary Margaret Pruitt. Come on over here.
Just speak right into here.
First of all, I want to thank so many of you who have renewed very recently, and we have a list. If you think you should be on it, you aren't, let me know. We made a concerted effort, well, actually, I think it started with you and Ann, and then I picked up some, to contact people whose dues were, hadn't been paid for a while, and we are a forgetful population. We all understand each other in that way. And so it was, but anyway, it was a productive effort. And so we've had, what we did is we published a list of those that have renewed just from maybe late December through now. And actually, I may not have gotten somebody that gave me a check today or something, but at any rate, I'm going to read the list, and I apologize if I mispronounce somebody's name. Don't hesitate to correct me. Nancy Bardeen, Ann Brand, Marcia and Robert Brown, Nancy Edquist, Carol Burkhardt, Bernie Kastner, May Gerstle, Karen Gwilliam, Connie Hollier, Neil McReynolds, Bonnie Miller, Pamela Mitchell, Mary Neumeister, Helen Parham, Zoe Shumway, Gloria Feely, Audrey Whitecamp, and Nancy Weisner. That may be Wiesner, I'm not sure. But thank you, those for renewing. And I meant to ask you to wave or stand up, and I didn't do that. So maybe each of you that are on the list can just wave. Thank you. Of course, we encourage others, everyone that hasn't renewed, to renew when your dues are drawing to a due date. And I can always give you the information about when your dues are due. I know the county, Seattle King County League sends reminders to each of us. But if you need to know from us what information we have, just let me know. And we always welcome guests, no matter what your status is, as far as being a member. One other thing, we are all about voting, and one of the things that's occurred to us lately is that there's some movement within Horizon House, primarily from the West Tower into other apartments. And one of the important things is to change your voter address. And we have forms in the mailroom. I have some with me. And of course, this is important for anybody that moves within the city or the state. But if you want to take some forms, you can do this online as well. But again, we have some here, we have some in the mailroom, and just a reminder because it's not real common to move within a building and think about having to do those kinds of things. So, and that's all I have to say. Any questions?
Questions?
Sally?
I just wanted to say that our Black Lives Corner on 9th and Seneca every Friday from 12 to 1, when it gets into October, November, I also wear my big one woman, one vote. And I also show on the video at that time, again, the video of one woman, one vote, and what's the Hollywood, and also the Hollywood update version of it, Iron Jawed Women. So those will be coming.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. I am Doris Ray, and
We want you to be seen on the.
I'm Doris Ray, and I am, it seems to me, writing checks to League of Women Voters for one thing or another many times during the year. I'm wondering, dues are paid locally to you to Seattle and county, is that right?
And the national.
And the national comes through the local,
Yes.
so you only pay for one. What about state?
The, when you pay your dues, and Joan, step in here if I'm misspeaking, when you pay your dues to the local chapter, which is Seattle King County, a portion of those, the lion's share of those dues, do not remain with the entity that you pay to, the smaller entity. A portion goes to the state and a portion goes to national. I don't know what that portion is here. It's one thing I should find out. And those are used at the state level and at national level for their activities. You only pay dues to one.
Once.
And when I was involved before moving here, you could not belong to two entities, just one. And many people will donate because, of course, like any nonprofit, the league is constantly trying to get us to donate.
Exactly.
At one, either to any of the three entities. Our local, Seattle King County, the state. I don't think here the state, I think Allison told me that the state they've encouraged at the state level not to be requesting donations. I'm not so sure that's working, but.
They do request,
And
they do
okay.
solicit.
And then also national, and it's very confusing because as long as I've been involved, people think that these solicitation letters that they get for various sorts of donations are dues, and they aren't. It's a dues are, it's identified as your due, as dues. Does that help, or?
Just look at the address, the return address. If it says Washington DC, ignore it. Only pay to Seattle King County, and our unit gets zero money. Ann, oh, just a minute, Ann.
If you,
Ann,
Turn
Turn and face the camera.
if you are donating to Seattle King County League, be sure that you put donation down in the left bottom line, or if you're paying dues, put dues, because it can be very confusing, and some people that thought they were paying dues, it wound up in donation, and then they were irate because they thought they paid their dues, but it had gone to donation. So it's very important that you specify, is this donation or is this dues?
Is this on the form that is being sent to us?
Yes, I believe it is, and if you write a check, you certainly have that
Well,
little.
you check, but
Yeah,
much of it goes through,
and if it isn't, you can mark up the thing so it says, feel free to write in big letters.
the league has a 501c3 and a 501c4. One is, you can count it as your donation, and the other you don't. Now, Nancy, tell us about Mary Margaret, will you?
I'll tell you what I wrote.
Just a minute, and will you face the camera and take this microphone?
It's on. Thank you. Mary Margaret Pruitt is a wonderful person. And many people know her and love her. And she is overwhelmed by the number of messages and the letters, and there's a overall caring bridge, thank you, that comes to her, and I have known her for a long time as well, and she is overwhelmed by the cheerleading that people are doing with her. Right now they've moved her to assisted living. She can't have she prefers not to have a lot of visitors, but she will pick up the phone and call somebody, or she is doing well with her rehab attempts. And if she were at all able to, you could know she would be here now, cheering you all on. That's the kind of person she is.
Thank you. I want to also add that my son interned for her husband, Paul Pruitt, when he was a state representative, when Jeffrey was in law school. So we have that connection. Is this league business now?
I wanted to add to Mary Margaret.
Okay.
Just a sentence Sally read, and it's Mary Margaret, the sing-along group, which she also played the ukulele at 98 now. And she was paralyzed through half of her body, including her face and tongue. So at first she was very hard to understand. Her voice is now as clear as a bell, having spoken to her by phone. And she said, I'm getting better. But the sing-alongs made a card, Zoa did, with all of their pictures and we miss you, and everyone signed it, and she was so touched by that. Was just delighted, and she called Carr, Mrs.
Danny.
Carr, to
Danny.
thank the whole group.
Danny.
Denny Carr, thank you.
Well, thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Anne, for your comments. And we'll see you in a month.